welcome to Gun&Run Gaming. I am Dr. Nick 010 and this is of course somewhat Stygian. Well, it has been a long 8 weeks or so worth of playing this game, but we are finally here at the grand conclusion to our Darkwood series. If you've been following through, you'll know that this has not been an easy game in places, but I've put some hours over the past week and a half into this game. I've really tried to crack it. It's been a pretty tough nut, but I finally made it all the way through and completed it. I've been thoroughly entertained by this game. It really is a spectacle and a half. It was very difficult in places, but I finally got all the way through, and I've really enjoyed pretty much every minute of it, with a couple of exceptions. But what I want to do for you guys this evening is give a bit of a roundup video. If you remember at the end of the last video, I mentioned that I wanted to review the game. I don't know how usual it is to stop halfway through a playthrough series on YouTube and end it with a kind of review video, but that's what I'm going to do because that's what I want to do. So let's get straight into it, shall we? I've got some footage from some of the last few days of playing. I'm not going to show you everything because I want people to go out there and play this game for themselves. It's a really great game. It deserves to be played, it deserves some recognition, and I don't just want people watching this footage and then not going away and trying it out for themselves. So I really hope you enjoy this video. Let's get straight into the review, shall we? So the first thing I really want to say about this game is the level of exploration on it is phenomenal. It's really fantastic. There's literally something to find in every single nook and cranny of this game, whether it be crates and dead bodies to search that are just lying around in the middle of fields or half submerged in a bog, to caves that are hidden, you know, in the corner of the map across a little brook, or whether it be a camp of savages that are kind of hiding out in the middle of a patch of poisonous mushrooms. There's just so much to see in this game, and the developers have really done a fantastic job of mapping out a world that isn't repetitive or boring. It's a world that desires to be explored, and a world that you're going to want to explore. Something that I didn't realise until recently is the maps, well, the game itself is actually procedurally generated. When you start the game up, the map that you get for episode 1 with the dry meadow and silent forest and old wood is actually completely randomly generated. It has all of the basic locations in it, such as the pig shed and the various hideouts and Pietrex's house and all of the kind of bits that are necessary to the main storyline. But every time you play through the game, they will be in different places, and all of the little kind of intriguing spots that you find, all of the copses of trees and abandoned tanks and little interesting places across the map are completely different every time you play through the game. So there's a lot of versatility to this game. There's a lot of replay ability. There's a lot of replay value, I should say, which is absolutely fantastic. Playing through this game, I know that I didn't see everything there was to see. I didn't explore every single location, especially towards the end of the first chapter, and also in the second chapter. As the game gets harder, you have to think a little bit more carefully about where you want to go. Obviously you want to progress through the storyline and get to the end of the game, so you don't really want to be looking through every single location, and that's a good thing. It means that the next time you play through the game, you're going to visit different places to the ones you visited before. And one other thing that is really great about this game is that there's actually different ways of completing the game as well. I probably should have mentioned that first. So obviously, you saw from the playthrough that I did that the wolf guy wanted me to find a key for him. Now you can find that key and you can give it to him, but you can also give it to another character, which is what I did, and that opens up a completely separate path to go down, which again is wonderful. It adds to the replay value of the game. And if I play through this game again, which I most likely will in the future, I'm not only going to get a completely different storyline to play through, but I'll get a completely different set of maps as well, which is really wonderful. I think the development team have really put some thought into that, and I think it's one of the strongest aspects of the game, in all honesty. Another thing that's really brilliant about the game is just the variety in events and things that happen in the game. I mentioned before, during the playthrough, that I really liked the fact that the night sections of the game aren't always the same. Right at the beginning of the game, they may seem fairly quiet. You get the occasional wolf. Some nights nothing seems to happen really, but actually as you start going through the game, lots and lots of different things happen. There's all sorts of weird occurrences. It's not just things breaking through the windows. You get those banshee things that scream and send all their kind of little banshee children at you. You get weird characters appearing in your room. You get random kind of storms brewing up, wind gushing through your hideout and blowing all the furniture out of place. Sometimes all the furniture seems to magnetise itself into the centre of the room. I realised that some of the events where you see kind of lights flashing outside, you can actually find shiny stones in those locations, so the game's kind of, it tries to tempt you out of your hideout as well if you're kind of just locking yourself in a room and trying not to engage in combat with the things creeping around outside. And of course there's all the kind of weird noises and just bizarre, unsettling things that happen. And it's really fantastic, and it means that a section of the game which could get boring very quickly actually stays interesting for a vast portion of the game. And I think that's actually quite a difficult thing to achieve. So again, props to the development team for managing to do that. Obviously, one massive fantastic aspect of the game is the atmosphere, and the music and the sound effects really heavily add to this. I love the kind of low-key, kind of synthy music that plays in the game. I like the kind of the low-level kind of booming sound effects that happen from time to time at different places. I really like the kind of ghostly kind of echoes and dog cries and children crying that you hear in different places in the dream, whether it be in the dreams in the game, whether it be in the dream sequences or when you're just kind of wandering around the woods themselves. And they really do kind of add to that sense of kind of claustrophobia, because you don't know where to turn, you don't know how to get away from these sounds. And on the topic of claustrophobia, I really like the fact that your character is constantly stuck in this kind of little bead of light, and you can only look in and see things in one specific direction at any given time. It has you constantly kind of literally looking over your shoulder to see if anything's creeping up on you, having to turn around left and right to see whether there's any sign of danger anywhere, and it really does make the game quite tense. So I want to just mention one of my favourite parts of the game, actually, and it was a location called the Village. And this was a location that I actually visited not long after filming the 7th part of this series. And it's a a location that's very different in tone to the parts of the game that preceded it, for two main reasons. The first is it's quite a large location that doesn't have any enemies in it, really. There is one small part that has an enemy in it, but for the most part there aren't any dangers in this location. And the second reason is that, as you might be able to see from the footage, there's a time freeze in play. So suddenly you're placed in this rather large location with no frustration or tension caused by the passing of time, no danger caused by enemies or monsters, and you can just stroll around at leisure and explore the place. And that's something that I really enjoy doing in games like this. I love just wandering around atmospheric environments, and as you can see from the footage, this location contains a number of interesting characters in it. There's not many people that you can actually talk to in this location, but they all are engaged in some sort of activity, and they all have something to kind of say as you're passing them by. And it's a very weird area, to be honest. There's something not quite right about it. There's something a little bit off about the people. As you wander through the houses, you see kind of people laying in bed shaking and kind of stuttering and muttering to themselves. You see people sitting in the corner of their houses looking like they're in pain or some sort of distress. There's weird, freakish people that you come across, and it's just a really wonderful place to visit, and it really kind of changed the pacing of the game in a way that was completely different from the normality of running around the forest, kind of wondering when night is going to fall and wondering whether you have the equipment that you need, and whether you're ready to face the monsters that the darkness is going to bring. And I really enjoyed just looking around this area, and I mean, there was a number of places, a number of houses in this area that I didn't even get to fully explore. As I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of this game that I didn't get to see. And so this is an area that I'd really like to come back and have a look around again. I'd like to explore some of the houses that I didn't get to fully look around. And one other thing that I really liked about this village, you might have noticed in the footage a few seconds ago that there was a little shrine to the entrance. And this is something that repeatedly pops up in this game, kind of Christian symbols that have been kind of distorted in some kind of disturbing way. I really like the idea that this village was kind of once a kind of bastion of Christendom, and in some way it's kind of fallen. The people have either they've gone mad in some kind of way, or they've been kind of twisted by the evil of the forest, and you keep finding these kind of wooden crosses and little shrines and weird things that have been kind of altered in some sort of disturbing way. It really kind of adds to the atmosphere of the game. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of characters in this village. There's two particular characters that you come across that you can actually interact with, and they are the chicken lady and the musician, also called the violin boy, I believe. And that's something else that's really great about this game. You just come across so many interesting characters, both the ones that you talk to and the ones that you don't. And the development team and also the artists who have created the graphics for this game have done a really, really great job of constructing the weirdest, most sinister, strange, eerie characters for you to interact with, and every one is unique in its own way, and every character you come across is just a little bit different and weird in a completely different way to the last one that you've interacted with. and I think they've done a really fantastic job just there. Now, we of course do need to ask ourselves the question, does Darkwood have any flaws? And the answer is of course yes. Yes it does. Rarely is there a game that has no weaknesses, and Darkwood, like all other games, isn't 100% perfect. There are a couple of small flaws in the game, however I do have to add that they are very minor. The first of these flaws is with the crafting system. Now, I actually think the crafting system in this game overall is very well put together. First of all, there's the fact that the developers have thought ahead and they've made sure that all of the items in the game have some sort of use past their primary use. So for example, the mushrooms that you find in the game, which are used to upgrade your character, they're obviously very necessary at the beginning of the game and also towards the middle and late game in making your character better, in giving him special abilities to help you survive the nights. But there does come a point later in the game when you've actually completely upgraded all of your abilities. Well, what happens with the mushrooms then? And the developers have actually thought about this, and they've made it so that the mushrooms simply degrade in your inventory, and then you can use them to make gas bombs that you can create using the rotting mushroom and a bottle, which is very good. And the same is with most of the other items in the game. The stones, which can be used to upgrade your spade and make it stronger, can also be thrown at enemies. They're not particularly strong, but they do have a use. And I think the developers should be applauded for thinking this far ahead. However, I do feel like some of the items and some of the crafting combinations haven't been fleshed out as well as they could have been. A lot of the items in the game are made by putting together quite vague items, such as scrap, tape, metal bars, nails, planks of wood, and then you suddenly come across items such as the gun, which is made with maybe some scrap and some nails and then a handgun frame, which seems oddly specific. And it's the same with some of the other items. The spade, for example, is made with, I believe it's a metal bar and an entire spade end. And I would have thought it would be a little bit more consistent with the rest of the crafting system to have everything be made with kind of more vague items like bits of wire, bolts, nuts, bits of metal. For instance, they could have made it so you have kind of bent metal plates, the sort of thing that you might find on the chassis of a car, and that could be used to make a spade rather than actually having a full spade head as an item. And I guess there's again, it's a fairly minor thing. It doesn't really take away from the game that much. And also, on the topic of the crafting system, there's also the fact that at the beginning of the game, you're really kind of scrabbling around to find items you need. You're really needing to find cans of fuel quite quickly so that you can keep your generator running at night. You're needing to hastily find many planks of wood and nails so that you can barricade your houses and make weapons for yourself and also fix the existing weapons that you've got. But later on in the game, as you find new hideouts and the locations become more difficult, you also find that you're gaining a lot more reputation for surviving the nights, and you're also finding a lot more useful items. You're finding a lot more fuel, you're finding a lot more scrap. And so at the later part of the game, mainly in the second episode, you start to find yourself in a situation where you're coming across caches of items such as crates lying around in fields that you'll open, and they'll be filled with great items such as handgun frames and canisters of fuel and maybe a bunch of poison mushrooms, but by that point in the game, none of them are really that necessary anymore. I'm not sure how exactly this could have been resolved by the dev team, but it strikes me as though maybe it wasn't fleshed out quite as well as it could have been. As I mentioned, this is a very minor point, and actually I think the dev team have done a very, very good job on the whole of putting the crafting system together, and for the most part of the game, for the majority of the game I should say, it works really well and it's really fun running around and finding items. One other thing I was slightly disappointed about with this game is that there was never really another location in it like the village. As I mentioned previously, that was my favourite area in the game by far. I really liked the atmosphere in it, and I loved the fact that you could wander around and explore to your heart's content without having to worry about the passage of time or about enemies attacking you from every side, and there were loads of interesting characters to interact with. However, this was the only part of the game that really had anything like that, and especially going into episode 2, the tension really ramps up. The enemies become a lot more difficult. There's a whole new selection of enemies that you face in the second episode, and you spend a lot of time kind of creeping around the forest. You don't do quite as much running because you find yourself dying quite often if you run around the swamp in the second episode too much. And I really wanted to see another large area like the village in the second episode, which I could explore. And it could be that there was one and I just missed it. There are a couple of locations that I didn't investigate fully, but as far as I saw, there wasn't another section like this, and it was slightly disappointing. I liked the change in pace, and I think it really kind of broke up the intense sections of the game, and added a new depth to it, so it was slightly disappointing that there wasn't another part of the game like that. One final slight flaw that I found with the game is with the alternate ending. Now, I don't want to give too much away, because it is sort of a secret in the game, but there is an alternate ending that you can unlock, and it's by going through a certain section of the game which is set up in a way that you have one chance, and one chance only, to complete it. Now that in itself, that's not a problem whatsoever. These sorts of tropes appear in all sorts of different games, and it adds a level of complexity, and you know, it adds a challenge to the game for the user to complete. So I mean, I see that as a good thing. However, this section of the game is medium in length, and there are a few parts of it which are quite difficult to navigate, and I managed to navigate these successfully somehow. However, there was a bit right at the end of the section where I felt it unfairly stopped you from achieving what you were trying to achieve. It was unexpected, and it reminded me a little bit of that. It kind of reminded me in a way a little bit of that game which PewDiePie plays, where things just randomly jump out and kill you. I think it's a platformer, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it felt a little bit like that. It felt a little bit like the developers had placed a gotcha in there, and it was less of a challenge and more of a frustration. And the simple fact of the matter is that I felt at that second in time, just before I got killed, that I'd completed the game, and so to then have to play more hours of the game, it felt like I had been unjustly trapped into playing more of the game. And it did take me maybe an hour of play to kind of get back into it and get enjoying it again, because it did feel like a little bit of a trick on the developers' part. Now, of course, it may just be that that sort of thing is not my style. It could also be that I'm just not very good at this kind of game, but I wasn't a massive fan of that part of the game. It didn't ruin the game for me, of course, and it was quite near the end of the game. I'd already put in about 37 hours at that point, and so I'd got plenty of fun out of the game. And as I say, I did manage to get into it properly again after about an hour of play. It was just a little bit disappointing that I didn't manage to complete that bit. Well, before I give you my final kind of thoughts on the game and give it a rating, I thought I would share with you a final little bit of footage. I'm not going to show you any footage from the second episode of the game. I want you to experience that for yourself. But what I will do is show you my first night in the hideout in the old woods, which was a challenge and a half. Now, of course, this was only the second time I'd ever actually been in the old wood, and it was at this point that I was beginning to realise just how dark this area was. I had to use my camera a heck of a lot more in this area than I did anywhere else, just because of how dark it was and how dangerous the enemies were around this place. Now, the first thing you might notice about this hideout is that there is no perimeter fence, and this did create a few problems for me, as you will see shortly. I was very confused at this point. This house is particularly dark. There seems to be multiple entrances. Not that that's any different particularly from the last hideout that I was at. But my mind was racing. I was thinking, okay, how do I make myself safe in this place? How do I barricade this up so that I am snug and well protected from the creatures lurking around outside? And one thing that I actually realised when coming to this location is that depending on what hideout you're at, the amount of essence the poisonous mushrooms and other items give you changes. I'm surprised I didn't notice it when I was in the silent forest, but actually it completely depends on the hideout that you're at. I thought I was just finding mushrooms that were different, like better mushrooms. But if you use those same mushrooms at the dry meadow hideout, they might give you about 40 essence. If you use them at the hideout in the silent forest, they're probably going to give you maybe 100 essence. I can't remember the exact amounts. And then it's even more than that at the hideout in the old wood. And also the hideout in the swamp in episode 2 gives you yet more essence. But that was quite a useful discovery. As you can see, I found some very interesting items around this place. Now, as you can see, I have managed to conjure up our friend Mr. Bikeman, and as you will notice in but a few seconds, we actually do need to give him a bottle of alcohol every time we want him to get our items for us. And there you can see I have to give him a fresh bottle in order for him to do my bidding. Now, as you can see, we're heading swiftly towards night, and my backpack has appeared with all the contents from my hideout in the silent forest. Now, I'm about to craft a new item here, the light armour. This ended up being a very, very useful piece of equipment for me. It doesn't have charges like the weapon, like some of the melee weapons, sorry. And instead, it just takes up a space within your inventory and basically allows you to take more hits before you get knocked unconscious. And obviously here, it's now getting towards 6 o'clock and I'm frantically beginning to do my hideout up, start rebuilding some of those doors and making some of my barricades. Something that I wasn't quite sure of at this point was where was best to kind of barricade myself in, because as mentioned before and as you can see, there's a door at the kind of the south eastern wall of the house. There's a hole in the eastern side of the building, and there's also a hole at the north side, which is the one that we came through initially. So there's quite a lot of places that enemies can come in, and actually the holes on the north and west side can't be barricaded at all. You can't create doors there, you can't fix them up. So you're left a little bit exposed in this place, and that was a little bit of a concern for me. So what I decided was that I would barricade myself into this kind of little L-shaped section of the building. So we've got this little alcove that I'm in at the moment. We've also got the kitchen just above us, and also that room with the work desk in it. And here I was just going around kind of barricading the place up and making sure that I had bear traps in front of the doors. I've got one in my inventory there, as you can see. So it's always good to make sure that as many entrances as possible have bear traps in front of them, just in case something comes and breaks its way through, because you don't want to be swarmed by monsters. Oh yeah, and I found this item as well. I really like the way there's the kind of damp patch over her face. Kind of that smudge makes her look like she's wearing some sort of hideous kind of porcelain mask, which I thought was quite creepy and quite eerie looking. Obviously I've got a couple more bear traps I need to make. And 8 o'clock is rapidly approaching. And this was not a quiet night, let me tell you that for a fact. But did I make it through the night? Well, that's something that you will see in a couple of minutes. So I can't remember whether at this point I'd forgotten that I need to turn the generator on, or whether I was just being economic with my gas and leaving it till the final minute. I think probably by this point in the game I was trying to be economical and just make sure I wasted as little as possible. I really love the lighting in this game. I love the kind of red light that shines out from the well, and the kind of blue haziness that was lighting up the corridors just then. It just looks absolutely fantastic. It's really kind of striking and really adds a great layer of atmosphere to the game. I think that's probably something that I should have mentioned in my list of things I like about this game. I think the lighting is particularly well done. And obviously it's used to great effect. You've obviously got the night sections where the shadows come and you have to find a light to hide in, and there's obviously an ability you can get where if you stand in the light you get your health back. Yeah, it's really used to great effect, and especially in terms of the atmosphere. Now, night is upon us, but I decided I wanted to do a little bit of item management. As you can see though, I decided that a little bit late on, because I now have things trying to break their way into my house. But I thought to myself, hey, you know what, it's barricaded, I've got a bear trap down, I'll be fine. but as you'll see in a second, I've now got something trying to break the door open to the north of me as well, so I've now got to try and keep my eye on both entrances. Now, obviously it's going to take a monster longer to break through a barricade than it is a door, so as you can see, that door's been broken. What monster is it though? And it is a dog! Oh, that was a beautiful shot. That wasn't so great. I was absolutely convinced that a monster had broken that wardrobe. I must have really been focused on that fight because I do not remember breaking it myself. I thought at that point that that door had been broken through as well, but it was actually just the barricade. And you can tell that it's not a savage because it would have just been able to open the door itself. But it is in fact another dog. And I think that's the first time that I ever saw a dog get caught in one of those bear traps. I didn't realise that it was able to kill them in one hit. I was very thankful that it killed it in one hit though. I didn't particularly want to fight another one. Now I'm thinking to myself, because I've now got 2 broken doors and not particularly well protected, I might as well have a little look around my house. And what do I find as I'm looking around? It's only a red chomper or red gobbler or whatever they're called. And this was stupid mistake number 1, because as I realise, the perimeter of my hideout is the walls itself, and so I am now running around like a headless chicken with the evil of the forest trying to consume me. But unlike last time, I actually managed to outrun it. And somehow managed to walk around my entire house and not die. Now, luckily, I had the good fortune of not instantly being attacked by that monster, and so I was able to very quickly use a bandage to get my health back up. But as you can hear, there's something stomping its way around my house still, and it is in fact that monster. Now it hasn't noticed me yet, so I have the very bright idea to shoot it in the back of the head, which works to start off with, but what I don't realise is no bullets left. Oh my goodness. Absolute nightmare. Absolute... am I going to die? Am I going to die? No, no, I'm going to run away. Probably the cleverest thing I've done in a little while. And I just keep running around thinking I've outran it, but then, oh my goodness, what's going on? There's another one there! 2, run, 3! What's going on? Am I going to die? No, I'm not. I am one lucky son of a gun, and as you can see, I got 200 reputation from that rather frantic encounter. What a fantastic game this is. So there we have it, Darkwood in all of its glory, an atmospheric romp with plenty of hideous creatures to face, strange characters to meet, and bizarre places to explore. I have thoroughly enjoyed playing this game, and I think it is an absolutely wonderful piece of media. If I was going to rate it, I think I would have to give this game a solid 4 out of 5. Will I be playing it again? Who knows? There's a lot of games out there, but if I have time I would definitely like to try it again. I'd definitely like to see what the maps will look like next time round, and I would like to try one of the alternative paths through the game, and maybe I'll be able to see what that alternative ending is finally like. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure making this series, and as you can imagine, I'm already thinking about the many different games I could play for my next series. What I'm actually going to do is I've got a couple of videos lined up which are going to be standalone videos. I think this has been quite an intense set of playthrough videos, and I want to make sure that I'm mixing it up a little bit. So I'm going to leave it a secret for now, what I'm going to do, but all I can say is stay tuned for next week's instalment of Somewhat Stygian. It's going to be a good one. I've got some interesting stuff planned for you guys, so please do watch this space. Well, as always, thank you for joining me this evening. It has been an absolute pleasure. This has been Somewhat Stygian. I have been Dr. Nick 1010. Thank you for joining me, and cheers.